I never imagined I'd end up as the kind of forest ranger who finds himself staring down the barrel of something he can't make sense of. But that's exactly what happened to me during my third year working in South Dakota's Black Hills National Forest. My name is Michael Anderson, and the incident I'm about to describe took place in October 2019. Every word is true, even the parts I still can't quite wrap my head around. The Black Hills are not like other national forests. Sure, there are pine-covered mountains and rocky outcrops, as you'd expect, but there's something else, like the wind rustling through the trees at night, or the shadows seeming a little deeper when you're out there alone. The Dakota tribe considered these hills sacred, and after what I experienced, I can't blame them. In this 1.2 million acre expanse, there are places where you can feel the weight of all history on your shoulders, and these places remind you that you are walking on soil where things unimaginable have happened. It started on a Tuesday morning, unseasonably cold for early October. I was at the Mystic Ranger District office, nursing my second cup of coffee and going through the daily briefing with my supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Volkman, who'd been with the Forest Service for 23 years. She had this way of looking at you that made you feel like she could see right through any bullshit you might be thinking of feeding her. I respected the hell out of her. "Anderson," she said, sliding a folder across her desk toward me, "I need you to run a check on the Deer Creek area. We've got a wildlife technician who was supposed to radio in yesterday afternoon. Christopher Brown. He was out there tracking elk migration patterns. Should have checked in at 1600 hours, didn't happen." I picked up the folder, flipping it open. Inside was Brown's file, complete with a photo of a guy in his late 20s with a scruffy beard and wire-rimmed glasses. He looked more like a graduate student than someone who spent his days tramping through the wilderness. But then again, most wildlife techs did. The file said he'd been with the Forest Service for 2 years, had a master's degree in wildlife biology, and according to his performance reviews, he was reliable. The kind of guy who didn't miss check-ins. "Could be his radio died," I offered, though even as I said it, I knew it was weak. These guys carried backup batteries and backup radios. Brown would have had to suffer a pretty catastrophic equipment failure to miss a scheduled check-in. Patricia gave me that look, the one that said she'd already thought of that and about a dozen other explanations. "His truck's still at the Deer Creek trailhead, checked this morning. I want you to drive out there, see if you can raise him on the radio, and if that doesn't work, hike the area. He filed a route plan so you'll know where he was supposed to be." "You want me to take someone with me?" I asked. Standard protocol for backcountry searches was to work in pairs, especially when you were dealing with potentially injured personnel. "Everyone else is tied up with that controlled burn over in the Norbeck district. You're it for now. But Anderson," she leaned forward, her expression serious, "if you don't find him by nightfall, you call it in and we'll organize a proper search party for tomorrow. Don't be a hero. These woods can turn on you fast, especially this time of year." I nodded, grabbed the folder, and headed out. My truck was parked outside, a white Chevy Silverado, with the Forest Service shield on the door and a light bar on top. I tossed Brown's file onto the passenger seat, along with my go bag, which was always packed with emergency supplies, extra batteries, a first aid kit, and enough food and water to last me a couple of days. If things went sideways, I'd learned early in my career that you never knew when a routine patrol would turn into something else entirely. The drive out to Deer Creek took about 45 minutes, most of it on narrow forest roads that twisted through stands of ponderosa pine and over ridges that offered glimpses of the surrounding hills. It was beautiful country, the kind that makes you understand why people spend their whole lives trying to protect places like this. But that morning, there was something off about it. The sky was overcast, low clouds pressing down on the treetops, and there wasn't much wildlife moving. No deer grazing in the meadows, no birds calling from the branches. Just silence and the sound of my tires on gravel. I reached the Deer Creek trailhead around 0930 hours. Brown's truck was right where Patricia said it would be. A green Toyota Tacoma, parked at the edge of the lot. I pulled up next to it and killed my engine, sitting there for a moment, just looking at the vehicle. It was locked, no signs of forced entry or struggle. Through the windows, I could see a couple of water bottles in the cup holders, a jacket draped over the back seat, and a field notebook on the dashboard. Nothing unusual, nothing that screamed emergency. I got out, walked around the truck, checking the tires and undercarriage. Out of habit, everything looked fine. No flat tires, no leaking fluids, no damage. I tried the door handles just to be sure, but they were all locked tight. Then I noticed something that made me pause. There was a layer of dew on the truck's hood and windshield, undisturbed except for where a couple of pine needles had fallen and stuck. That meant the truck had been sitting here overnight at least, maybe longer. If Brown had come back to it at any point, he would have disturbed that dew when he unlocked the door or checked his equipment. I keyed my radio. District, this is Ranger Anderson. I'm at the Deer Creek trailhead. Brown's vehicle is present and appears secure. No sign of the subject. I'm proceeding on foot to follow his planned route. Patricia's voice crackled back almost immediately. Copy that, Anderson. Keep me updated every hour and be careful out there. Will do. I clipped the radio back to my belt, shouldered my pack, and started up the trail. The Deer Creek Trail isn't particularly difficult, at least not for the first couple of miles. It follows an old logging road that winds along the creek, gradually climbing through mixed forest. This time of year, the aspens were turning gold, their leaves rustling in the light breeze that had started to pick up. Under different circumstances, it would have been a perfect day for a hike. But I wasn't out here to enjoy the scenery. I was looking for a missing man. And the longer I walked without seeing any sign of him, the more worried I became. According to Brown's route plan, he'd been focusing on a section of the forest about 3 miles in, near where Deer Creek split into 2 smaller tributaries. It was good elk habitat, lots of meadows and water sources, and he'd noted in his plan that he wanted to check some trail cameras he'd set up the previous week. I kept my eyes on the ground as I walked, looking for boot prints or any other indication that he'd come this way recently. The trail was soft in places, muddy from recent rain, and I could see plenty of tracks, deer, elk, what looked like a coyote or maybe a small wolf, but no human footprints that looked fresh. About 2 miles in, I came across the first thing that didn't sit right with me. There was a backpack sitting off to the side of the trail, partially hidden under a bush. I stopped, studying it for a moment before approaching. It was a standard hiking pack, green and black with yellow trim, and it looked like it had been there for a while. The fabric was damp and there were pine needles scattered across the top of it. I knelt down, carefully pulling it out from under the bush. The pack wasn't empty. I could feel weight inside it as I lifted it. I opened the main compartment and found what you'd expect from a wildlife technician: a water bladder, still half full, some energy bars, a rain jacket, binoculars, and a GPS unit. The GPS was off, probably out of battery by now. There was also a wallet in one of the smaller pockets. I opened it, already knowing whose face I'd see on the driver's license inside. Christopher Brown. I keyed my radio again. District Anderson, I found Brown's backpack approximately 2 miles up the Deer Creek Trail. It appears to have been here overnight. The pack contains his personal effects, including his GPS and wallet. No sign of Brown himself. I'm continuing the search. There was a longer pause this time before Patricia responded. When she did, her voice had an edge to it that I hadn't heard before. Copy that. Anderson, I want you to be extremely cautious. If Brown left his pack behind, there's a good chance he's disoriented or injured. Call out frequently and watch for any signs of distress. Understood. I left the pack where I'd found it, marking the location on my own GPS so I could find it again. Then I continued up the trail, moving slower now, calling out Brown's name every 100 yards or so. The forest swallowed my voice, the sound seeming to vanish into the trees without even an echo. It was getting colder, too. The temperature had dropped at least 10 degrees since I'd started hiking, and the wind was picking up, making the pine branches creak and sway overhead. Another mile up the trail, I found the second thing. This one stopped me cold. It was a ranger truck. Not Brown's personal vehicle, but an official Forest Service truck, one of the older models with the green and white paint scheme we'd phased out a few years back. It was parked on an overgrown logging spur road that branched off from the main trail, barely visible through the underbrush. The tires were flat, the windows were dirty, and the whole thing looked like it had been sitting there for a very long time. I approached it slowly, that feeling of wrongness growing stronger with every step. There shouldn't be a Forest Service truck out here. We kept strict inventory of all our vehicles, and I knew for a fact that none of them were missing. This truck looked like it had been abandoned decades ago. The paint was faded and peeling, rust eating through the wheel wells and rocker panels. When I got close enough to see through the windshield, my stomach tightened. There was a Forest Service jacket draped over the steering wheel. The old-style jacket with the shoulder patches and the badge sewn onto the chest, and sitting on the dashboard covered in dust and grime was a nameplate. I had to wipe the glass to read it, my hand leaving a clean streak across the windshield. The name read, Ranger Station, Deer Creek Patrol. But there was no Deer Creek Patrol. There never had been, at least not in the 20 years I'd been aware of Forest Service operations. In this area, I'd never even heard the term used before. I tried the door. Locked. I cupped my hands against the window and peered inside, looking for anything else that might tell me what this truck was doing out here. The interior was bare except for that jacket and nameplate. No keys in the ignition, no paperwork, no equipment, just dust and the smell of decay that seemed to seep through the door seals. My radio crackled. Anderson, this is District. Your last hourly check-in is overdue. Respond, please. I fumbled for the radio, my hands suddenly shaking. District Anderson, sorry, I found something. There's an old Forest Service truck out here. Looks like it's been abandoned for years. It's marked Deer Creek Patrol. Does that mean anything to you? Silence. For a long moment, there was nothing but static. Then Patricia's voice came back, tight and controlled. Say again, Anderson. You found what? An old Forest Service truck, green and white paint job, probably from the 70s or 80s. It's got a nameplate that says, Deer Creek Patrol. You ever hear of that? Another pause. Negative. There's no unit called Deer Creek Patrol in our records. Are you sure that's what it says? I looked at the nameplate again just to be certain. Positive. Listen, this is getting weird out here. I haven't found any sign of Brown except for his backpack, and now there's this truck that shouldn't exist. I think we need to... I stopped mid-sentence. From somewhere up ahead, deeper in the forest, I heard something that made every hair on the back of my neck stand up. It was a scream. Human. Desperate. and it was coming from the direction of Deer Creek. "Anderson, Anderson, respond!" Patricia's voice was sharp in my ear, but I barely heard it. Was already moving, running up the trail toward where that scream had come from, my hand instinctively going to the canister of bear spray on my belt. My boots pounded against the dirt path, my breath coming in quick gasps as I pushed through the underbrush. "Anderson, what's happening?" Patricia's voice crackled again, more urgent now. I forced myself to slow down just enough to key the radio. I heard a scream, maybe 200 yards north of my position. Moving to investigate. I didn't wait for her response. I just kept moving, my eyes scanning the forest ahead for any sign of movement. The trail narrowed as it climbed, the trees pressing closer on either side. The aspens had given way to dense stands of lodgepole pine, their straight trunks creating a maze of vertical shadows. The creek was louder here, rushing over rocks, somewhere off to my left, and the sound of it almost masked any other noise. Almost, but not quite. I heard it again. Not a scream this time, but a voice. Someone calling out, the words indistinct, but the tone clear. Distress, fear. I changed direction, leaving the trail and pushing through the undergrowth toward the sound. Branches whipped at my face and jacket, and my boots slipped on the carpet of wet pine needles covering the forest floor. "Hello," I shouted. "Forest Service, call out if you can hear me." For a moment, there was nothing, just the sound of the creek and the wind in the trees. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. "Help! Please, someone help me!" It was a man's voice, young, terrified. It had to be Brown. I crashed through a final screen of brush and found myself on the bank of Deer Creek. The water was running fast and high, swollen from recent rains, churning white over a bed of smooth river stones. And there, on the opposite bank, I saw him. Christopher Brown was pressed against a massive boulder, his back to the stone, his hands raised in front of him like he was trying to ward something off. His clothes were torn and muddy, his face scratched and bleeding, and his eyes were wide with a terror I'd never seen in another human being before. He was looking at something in the trees between us, something I couldn't see from my position. "Brown!" I yelled. "Christopher Brown, it's Ranger Anderson. What's wrong? What's happening?" His head snapped toward me, and for a second I thought he didn't recognize me, didn't even see me as human. Then understanding flooded his face, and he screamed, "Run! Get out of here! It's not safe!" "What's not safe? What are you talking about?" I started looking for a way across the creek. It wasn't wide, maybe 20 feet, but it was moving fast enough that I didn't want to just wade in. There had to be a crossing point, some rocks I could hop across. "You have to leave." Brown was hysterical now, his voice breaking. "It's the patrol. They don't want us here. They never wanted anyone here." Before I could ask him what the hell he meant by that, I saw them. 3 figures emerged from the trees behind Brown, moving with an unnatural stillness that made my skin crawl. They were wearing Forest Service uniforms, the old kind like the jacket I'd seen in that abandoned truck. Dark green with those distinctive shoulder patches, badges glinting dully, even in the overcast light. But something was wrong with them. Very wrong. Their movements were too smooth, too coordinated, like they were being controlled by the same puppet master. And their faces, God, their faces. They were pale, almost gray, and their eyes were dark pits that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. When they moved, they didn't walk so much as glide, their feet barely seeming to touch the ground. I've seen a lot of things in the backcountry. Bears, mountain lions, even a wolf pack once. But I had never, ever felt the kind of primal, instinctive fear that washed over me when I looked at those three figures. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to run, to get as far away from this place as possible. Brown saw me freeze, saw the expression on my face, and he knew I'd seen them too. "I told you," he screamed. "I told you to run." The three figures stopped about 10 feet behind Brown, forming a semicircle. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The message was clear. This was their territory, and we were trespassing. I forced myself to move, to think like a ranger instead of a terrified animal. I keyed my radio with shaking hands. "District, this is Anderson. I have visual contact with Brown. He appears injured and disoriented. I need immediate backup at—" I paused, trying to remember my exact coordinates, but my mind was blank. "I need backup at Deer Creek, approximately 3 miles up the main trail. Multiple individuals on scene." Static. Nothing but static. I looked at my radio, saw that the battery indicator was full, that everything seemed to be working fine, but there was no response from Patricia, no response from anyone. It was like the entire outside world had just ceased to exist. "The radios don't work out here," Brown called across the water. His voice was steadier now, like he'd moved past panic into some kind of numb acceptance. "I tried for hours yesterday. Nothing gets through. It's like we're cut off from everything." The three figures took a step closer to Brown, moving in perfect synchronization. He pressed himself harder against the boulder, and I saw tears streaming down his face. "Stay away from him," I shouted, my hand going to the bear spray on my belt. I knew it was useless, knew that whatever these things were, pepper spray wasn't going to stop them. But I had to do something. I couldn't just stand there and watch. One of the figures turned its head toward me, that slow, deliberate movement that made my stomach churn. When it looked at me, I felt it, like a physical touch, cold and invasive, probing at the edges of my mind. It was trying to understand me, trying to figure out what I was doing here, whether I was a threat. And then, just as suddenly as they'd appeared, they stopped. All three of them went perfectly still, like someone had hit a pause button. Brown seized the opportunity. He launched himself away from the boulder and into the creek, splashing through the icy water with desperate speed. The current caught him immediately, sweeping his legs out from under him. But he managed to keep his head above water. Swimming with everything he had toward my side of the bank, I ran downstream, trying to get ahead of him, looking for a spot where I could reach in and grab him without getting swept away myself. "Keep swimming," I yelled. "You're almost here." Behind him, the three figures started to move again. But this time, they weren't following Brown. They were backing away, retreating into the shadows of the forest, watching, waiting. I found a fallen log extending partway into the creek and scrambled out onto it, lying flat on my stomach and reaching down toward the water. Brown was coming up fast, his arms windmilling as he fought against the current. "Grab my hand," I shouted. He reached up, his fingers brushing mine, then slipping away. The current dragged him past me, and I thought I'd lost him. But then his hand found a rock, and he managed to stop himself, clinging to it with both arms, while his legs streamed out behind him like flags in the wind. I scrambled off the log and waded into the shallows, the icy water immediately soaking through my boots and pants. I grabbed Brown's jacket and pulled, hauling him toward the shore with all the strength I had. He helped as much as he could. his feet finding purchase on the rocky bottom, and together we stumbled onto the bank and collapsed on the wet grass. For a long moment, we just lay there, breathing hard, too exhausted and terrified to move. Brown was shaking violently, either from cold or fear or both. I forced myself to sit up, looking back across the creek to where those 3 figures had been. They were gone. The forest on the other side looked normal, peaceful, even like nothing had happened. "What the hell were those things?" I managed to say, my voice hoarse. Brown didn't answer right away. He was curled up on his side, his arms wrapped around himself, staring at nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was hollow. "Rangers, or they used to be. I don't know what they are now." I pulled my radio out again, tried one more time to raise Patricia or anyone at the district office. Still nothing but static. I looked at my GPS unit, thinking we could at least mark our location and start making our way back to the trailhead. But the screen was blank, completely dead despite having a full battery when I'd started the hike. "We need to move," I said, forcing myself to my feet. Every muscle in my body protested, but I ignored it. "Can you walk?" Brown nodded slowly, accepting my hand and letting me pull him up. He swayed on his feet, and I got a better look at him in the light. He was in bad shape. His clothes were shredded, his arms and face covered in scratches and bruises. There was a particularly nasty cut on his forehead that was still bleeding, and his eyes had that 1,000-yard stare you see in people who've been through something traumatic. "How long have you been out here?" I asked as we started walking, Brown leaning heavily on my shoulder. "I don't know," he said. "What day is it?" "Wednesday, October 9th. He made a sound that might have been a laugh but came out more like a sob. "I came out here Monday morning. That means 48 hours? It feels like longer. It feels like I've been running from them for days. Running from those 3 things? They're not the only ones." Brown stumbled, and I had to catch him to keep him from falling. "There are more of them in the forest. I don't know how many. They patrol these woods like they're still on duty, like they never stopped. And if they find you..." He trailed off, shuddering. "What happens if they find you?" I asked, even though part of me didn't want to know the answer. "They make you join them," Brown whispered. "That's what happened to the others." "What others?" Before he could answer, I heard something that made me freeze. It was the sound of an engine, distant but growing closer. A truck engine from somewhere up ahead on the trail. My first thought was relief. Someone had come looking for us, probably Patricia sending another ranger when my radio checks stopped coming through. But then I saw the look on Brown's face, the absolute terror. And I knew this wasn't rescue. "We have to hide," he hissed, grabbing my arm with surprising strength. "Right now. We have to get off the trail." "Brown, wait, that could be... It's not help." He was pulling me toward the trees, his eyes wild. "It's them, it's the patrol. They use the trucks to cover more ground, to find anyone who's lost in these woods." The engine sound was getting louder, and now I could hear tires on gravel, the crunch and pop of a vehicle moving slowly up the old logging road. I looked back down the trail and saw it. A green and white Forest Service truck, identical to the abandoned one I'd found earlier. But this one was moving, its headlights cutting through the gloom of the forest. Brown didn't wait for me to make up my mind. He yanked me into the underbrush, and we scrambled behind a fallen log, pressing ourselves flat against the damp ground. Through the gaps in the log's bark, I watched the truck approach. It moved slowly, deliberately, like whoever was driving was searching for something. The headlights swept across the trail, illuminating every tree, every rock. And in the cab, I could see shapes. Human shapes wearing those old Forest Service uniforms. The truck stopped right where we'd been standing just moments before. The engine idled for what felt like an eternity. Then I heard a door open, the creak of old hinges, and footsteps on gravel. Someone was getting out. "You are now part of Deer Creek Patrol. Report for your shift tomorrow at 0600 hours. Do not be late." Below that were two names, written in the same careful block letters. Memio, Anderson C. Brown. I stared at that paper for a long moment, then crumpled it up and threw it on the ground. "Get in the truck," I said to Brown. "Now." We didn't speak during the drive back to the district office. Brown sat in the passenger seat, staring straight ahead, occasionally touching the cuts on his face, like he needed to remind himself they were real. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that green and white truck following us. But there was nothing. Just normal forest road, normal trees, normal sky. When we pulled into the parking lot at Mystic Ranger District, Patricia was standing outside, her arms crossed, her face tight with worry. The second she saw us, she ran over. "Where the hell have you been?" she demanded. "You stopped responding to radio checks hours ago. I was about to organize a full search party." "My radio died," I said, which was true even if it didn't explain anything. "Found Brown about 3 miles up Deer Creek Trail. He's injured. Needs medical attention." Patricia took one look at Brown's condition and immediately called for an ambulance. Then she turned back to me. "What happened out there, Anderson? And I want the full story, not the sanitized version," I told her. All of it. The abandoned truck. The 3 figures in old Forest Service uniforms. The patrol truck that shouldn't exist. The carved message in the tree. I watched her face as I spoke. Saw the skepticism there at first. Then the dawning realization that I wasn't making this up, wasn't exaggerating. Something had happened out there. Something that didn't fit into any normal explanation. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Come inside. There's something I need to show you." We left Brown with one of the other rangers to wait for the ambulance, and Patricia led me into her office. She closed the door behind us, then went to a filing cabinet in the corner. From the bottom drawer, she pulled out an old folder, the kind we didn't use anymore. The label on it was handwritten, faded with age. Deer Creek Incident, 1952. She handed it to me without a word. I opened it, my hands still shaking slightly from the adrenaline that hadn't quite worn off yet. The first document was a missing persons report dated September 15th, 1952. 3 Forest Service rangers had gone missing during a routine patrol in the Deer Creek area. Their names were Robert Morrison, James Callahan, and Paul Martinez. The same names I'd seen carved into that tree. According to the report, the 3 men had been conducting a wildlife survey. When they failed to return to their station, a search party was organized. But they found nothing except the ranger's truck, abandoned on a logging road with no sign of the men themselves. The search went on for 2 weeks before it was finally called off. But that wasn't the end of it. I flipped through the other documents in the folder, each one more disturbing than the last. Over the years, there had been other incidents in the Deer Creek area. Hikers reporting seeing Forest Service rangers in old-style uniforms who disappeared when approached campers. Hearing truck engines in areas where no vehicles could access. And most disturbing of all, several people had gone missing in that same stretch of forest over the decades, and not many. Just 1 or 2 every 10 years or so. Never enough to establish a pattern, but enough to make you wonder. The last document in the folder was a memo, dated 1975. From the district ranger at the time, it recommended that the Deer Creek area be closed to public access, citing unusual circumstances and persistent safety concerns. But the recommendation was never implemented. Budget cuts, bureaucratic inertia, who knows? The area had stayed open. I closed the folder and looked at Patricia. "Why didn't you tell me about this before you sent me out there?" "Because I didn't know," she said, her voice quiet. "I found this folder 6 months ago when I was yet cleaning out the old archives. I didn't think, it's been almost 70 years. I figured it was just old tragedy, nothing more. I never imagined." She trailed off, but I understood. How could anyone imagine something like this? How could you plan for it or prepare for it? "What do we do now?" I asked. Patricia was quiet for a long moment, staring at the folder on her desk. Then she said, "We close the area. Officially, this time I'll cite erosion concerns, unstable terrain, whatever I need to say to keep people out. And we don't talk about what really happened out there. Because if we start spreading stories about ghost rangers and phantom patrol trucks, we'll sound insane. We'll lose our jobs, and someone else will open that area back up." "And Brown?" I asked. "What do we tell him? The truth? That he got lost, became disoriented, injured himself? Happens all the time in the backcountry. No one will question it." I nodded slowly. It made sense, in a horrible, pragmatic way. But there was one thing that still bothered me. What about that note? The one on my windshield. What note? I realized then that I'd crumpled it up and thrown it on the ground. At the trailhead, I hadn't thought to bring it with me as evidence. It said we were part of Deer Creek Patrol now, that we had to report for duty tomorrow morning. Patricia's face went very still. "Do you plan on going back there?" "Hell no. Then it doesn't matter, does it?" But I could see in her eyes that it did matter, that she was just as scared as I was, even if she was better at hiding it. The ambulance came and took Brown to the regional hospital in Rapid City. I gave my statement to Patricia, filling out the incident report with the sanitized version she'd asked for. Hiker became disoriented, sustained injuries from a fall located by Ranger Patrol, and extracted safely. Nothing about uniformed figures or phantom trucks or messages carved in trees. I drove home that night, my truck on autopilot, while my mind replayed everything I'd seen. When I got to my house, a small cabin about 10 miles from the district office, I sat in my driveway for a long time, just staring at nothing. Finally, I forced myself to get out and go inside. I took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the smell of that forest, the memory of those gray faces and dark pit eyes. Then I made myself some dinner that I didn't eat and sat on my couch with a beer I barely touched, watching the window as night fell. Around midnight, I heard a truck engine outside. The sound made my heart stop. I crept to the window and looked out, half expecting to see that green and white Forest Service truck idling in my driveway. But it was just my neighbor, coming home late from his shift at the lumber mill. His headlights swept across my window as he pulled into his own driveway, and I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. I tried to sleep that night, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw them. Those three figures in their old uniforms, standing in perfect formation, watching, waiting. I kept thinking about those names carved in the tree. Morrison, Callahan, Martinez, Rangers who went missing in 1952 and never came back. Except they had come back, hadn't they? Just not in any way that made sense. They were still out there, still on patrol, still carrying out duties that should have ended decades ago. And according to that note, They thought Brown and I were part of their patrol now. The next morning, I called in sick. I couldn't face going back to the district office, couldn't face the questions or the knowing looks from Patricia. I stayed home, doors locked, blinds drawn. Around 0600 hours, the time the note had said to report for duty, I found myself standing at my window, looking out at the forest that started where my property ended. And I swear to God, I saw movement in those trees. Just a flash of green uniform there and gone. Could have been my imagination. Probably was, but I still stepped away from the window and didn't look out again for the rest of the day. Brown called me a few days later from the hospital. They were keeping him for observation, running tests, making sure his injuries healed properly. But what he really wanted to talk about was what we'd seen out there. He needed to know I'd seen it too, that he wasn't crazy. I keep thinking about them, he said, his voice low, like he was afraid of being overheard. Morrison, Callahan, Martinez. Do you think they chose to stay out there? Or do you think something made them? I don't know, I said honestly. I've been trying not to think about it. I can't stop, Brown admitted. I keep wondering if we're next. If one day we'll just disappear and people will find us out there, still wearing our uniforms, still on patrol. That's not going to happen, I told him, trying to sound more confident than I felt. We made it out. We're fine. Are we? He was quiet for a moment. I had a dream last night. I was back in those woods, and they were there, Morrison and the others, and they told me it was time for my shift. Time to join the patrol. It was just a dream, I said. But I'd had similar dreams every night since the incident, always the same, always ending with me walking into those woods, putting on that old Forest Service jacket, becoming part of something that should have ended 70 years ago. Maybe, Brown said, but he didn't sound convinced. The Deer Creek area was officially closed 2 weeks later. Patricia cited unstable geological conditions and potential hazard to public safety. There were some complaints from hikers and outdoor groups, but nothing major. Most people just accepted it and went somewhere else. I stayed on as a ranger for another 6 months before I finally put in my resignation. I told Patricia it was for personal reasons, that I'd decided to pursue other opportunities. She didn't argue or try to talk me out of it. I think she understood that I couldn't do the job anymore. Not after what I'd seen. How could I patrol those woods, knowing what might be out there waiting? Brown left the Forest Service too. He transferred to a desk job with the EPA, something that kept him far away from any forests or wilderness areas. We don't talk much anymore. I think we both prefer it that way. Talking about it means remembering, and remembering means facing the questions we can't answer. But sometimes, late at night when I can't sleep, I think about those 3 rangers, Morrison, Callahan, Martinez. I wonder what happened to them on that patrol in 1952, what they found out there in those woods, what found them, and I wonder if they're still out there, still walking those trails, still checking in at stations that don't exist anymore. And I wonder if the note was right. If Brown and I really are part of Deer Creek Patrol now, whether we want to be or not, if someday something will call us back to those woods, if we'll put on those old uniforms and join the others, walking those trails forever. I moved to Colorado last year, took a job doing environmental assessment for a mining company. It's boring work, mostly paperwork and site visits to places that have been mined out and reclaimed. But it keeps me away from national forests, away from ranger stations and patrol trucks and the kind of silence you only find deep in the wilderness. Sometimes, though, when I'm driving through the mountains on my way to a job site, I'll see a green and white vehicle in my rearview mirror. Just for a second. just a glimpse, and my heart will stop, and my hands will get slippery on the steering wheel. But when I look again, it's always gone. Just a trick of the light, just my imagination. At least that's what I tell myself. Because the alternative is too terrifying to accept. The alternative is that they're still looking for us, that the patrol never ends, never rests, that somewhere in the Black Hills of South Dakota, 3 rangers are still on duty, still searching for the 2 who got away. And one day, they're going to find us. I still have that folder Patricia gave me, the one about the Deer Creek incident. I keep it in a box in my closet, buried under old tax returns and forgotten paperwork. Sometimes I take it out and read through it again, looking for answers I know I'll never find. Looking for some explanation that makes sense, that fits into the world I thought I understood. But there are no answers. Just questions. Just 3 names carved into a tree, and the echo of truck engines in empty woods. If you're reading this, if you're a hiker or camper or someone who loves the outdoors, do me a favor. If you ever find yourself in the Black Hills near Deer Creek, turn around. Go somewhere else. Don't ask why. Don't investigate. Just leave. Because some patrols never end. Some rangers never clock out, and some duties last forever. I learned that the hard way. And I'm one of the lucky ones I got out. For now.